les gusta que nos estemos juntando, porque todos los días vamos ganando. No quieren que los latinos anden despertando. Abre los ojos para ver lo que está pasando. No les gusta que nos estemos juntando, porque todos los días vamos ganando. No quieren que los latinos anden despertando. Abre los ojos para ver lo que está pasando. Abre los ojos y libra la mente. Pa' la verdad se mira sediente. Todos los días noticias te mienten. Políticos controlan cómo te sientes, pero no va a pasar tan fácilmente, porque muchos peleamos por nuestra gente. Un punto de vista que está diferente y lo voy a explicar más claramente. Aquí no estamos pa' las divisiones, pero los demócratas tienen otras intenciones. Nuestras ciudades andan en malas condiciones, gastando los impuestos por los 1,000 millones, sin buenas razones en otras naciones. Es tiempo de cambiar todas estas instituciones. Es tiempo de hacer unas decisiones.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Latino Free Minds. I am Gio. This is my co-host, Christian. Christian, how you doing?
How's it going, Gio? Doing all good over here. Pretty hyped over here. It's a little mayhem, but on the bright side, hockey's our sport now.
You watching the American sport today of watching the State of the Union?
Yeah, I did. I got to take that in a little bit. Trump,
Well,
hey man, he could do some stand-up comedy. I mean, the whole demeanor, his head shakes, he points his whole body. His lines are, the guy's a Chad.
he's an entertainer.
He's an
He's an
entertainer.
entertainer. But look, Christian, we got something great in store for today.
Ooh.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for a fighter who doesn't back down, a true American patriot. He's a battle-tested United States Marine Corps veteran, a machine gunner who has deployed to Afghanistan, stared danger in the face so the rest of us could enjoy our freedom and liberty. He's the bold author of Common Sense for California, a guide to the new revolution, a no-nonsense blueprint for taking our state back with actionable steps like uniting around common sense principles and against long-standing political elites. He's a successful real estate business owner who knows how to build wealth, create jobs, and make things happen in the real world. The American people love him, and the establishment fears him. He's ready to dive into the state's books, root out every bit of fraud, mismanagement, and hidden waste, and bring real accountability, transparency, and fiscal sanity back to California. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the candidate for the California State Treasurer, David Serpa.
Gio, Christian, good to see you guys. I
Good to
appreciate
see
that
you.
introduction.
I'm so glad to have you back, David. How are you doing?
Always a good time.
I'm ready for it. It's been, I think, about 9 or 10 months since the last time I was on with you guys.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to updating everybody on what's been going on.
Well, let's start with the update because you came out just a couple weeks ago and announced that you are running for the California State Treasurer.
Yeah, that's correct. It was one of those things where a lot of people were looking at the governor's race and, my entrance into the governor's race, and they were looking at a very crowded field. But from the beginning, it's always been about creating a team. And that's what I talked to you guys about 10 months ago. It's what I've been working on now for 14 months, is finding people that were willing to run for the executive branch, educating the public on what the executive branch is, and then getting the right people in the right places. I met with Sheriff Bianco, Steve Hilton, and a few others out in LA about all of us getting together and starting to work towards creating a slate or a team that doesn't just include the executive branch, but the Senate, the Assembly, the Congress, et cetera. And that's been what I've been working on ever since, is finding the right people in the right places, all the way down the ballot, inspiring people to hopefully run for office. It just so happens that the right place for me to fit in is in the treasurer's position. And it's someplace where I've been asked to run for treasurer. And so I decided to jump in there, take care of the people's money, be a good steward of their money, look after the natural resources, the oil, the water, and natural gas, and make life affordable again for everyday Californians.
Well, the state treasurer is the chief banker and investment officer. But to be honest with you, I had to look up what the California State Treasurer does because it almost seems like the current one doesn't do much of the job that they're supposed to do. I don't know if you want to jump in on the failures of what's going on currently in California.
Oh, sure. I mean, you look at, and what I've been talking to, Steve about is this $258 billion of fraud that's been highlighted. There was a 98-page report that was released by the state auditor that highlights 8 agencies that are specifically susceptible to fraud. And what I would do going in there as treasurer is stop the waste, fraud, and abuse before it happens. It's the controller's job to find it once it happens. It's the attorney general's job to prosecute those findings, but the treasurer needs to be a better steward of our money to make sure that those checks are never being written in the first place. And so, audit the waste, fraud, and abuse, but then stop funding these wasteful programs that are redundant, bureaucratic, and don't serve the people.
David, you brought it up, the auditor's report that showed a bunch of failures, and not just recent failures, but reading through the report, there's failures going back decades. I work in the technology industry, and there's reports in there for the IT side of the state that they have been failing to improve things that they were told to improve way back in 2007. You think back to 2007, you got to think, well, how far have we come in technology since 2007 that you can't fix the things that you're supposed to fix? And that's just one example of the things that they found there. We've spent a few weeks going through the auditor's report and putting it out there, and we get a lot of pushback. We get a lot of pushback. People saying, "Well, you don't know what you're talking about." And all I can say is, it's there for you to read too. It's not
Correct.
hidden. So,
Yeah,
what do
the
you?
public can have their access to it. People want to disqualify people from participating in government like you have to have a degree. The whole point of our government is that the people are the fourth branch. I actually heard somebody the other day complaining about Nick Shirley exposing fraud and that he's come here to California and that we don't want anything to do with the circus that he brings into town. And I thought that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
I was very excited that Nick Shirley was coming to town. And how sad is it that it takes a 23-year-old YouTuber to come to California, Dakota, Minnesota, to start exposing this sort of stuff when we have all these mines? But the truth is that we've been mentally, spiritually, financially bankrupted, devastated, over the course of many years, and demoralized to where we don't feel like we can stand up to anything. The problem is too big. Who am I to read into this report? And the truth is we are qualified, that we are the people. This is what the government is all about. And so when we start highlighting these issues, things that people don't talk about, we bring them up. And money isn't the most exciting thing to talk about, but it's the root of all of our problems here in California. There's no reason why we should be going from a $38 billion surplus to a $60 billion deficit in a 5-year period. A $98 billion deficit or swing in the wrong direction, which alone should disqualify Governor Newsom from holding further office. But it's not just Newsom. And that's part of the problem that people need to realize. There's a controller, a state controller, whose job it is to audit government spending. That's Malia Cohen, and she's done a terrible job auditing the government spending. Fiona Ma is the one who's been writing the checks. That's the treasurer's office. Rob Bonta is the one who's supposed to be prosecuting all these findings of fraud that are coming out of Sacramento, that are coming out of the state auditor's office. But when we find the problem, when we find the missing money, when we see that $24 billion is missing $26 billion is missing from homelessness, when we see another, 10-year, $10 billion homeless program in Los Angeles, we know that there is waste, fraud, and abuse. Prosecute. That's the attorney general's jobs. But the problem is that we no longer know how to talk about government. And so we talk about things like Doge, and Doge is great and all, but that's the controller's job. The controller's job is to find the waste, fraud, and abuse.
Well, we have corrupt bandits running the state, and when you think about the things that we're supposed to be focused on, specifically with the treasurer, funding operations, building infrastructure, protecting investments, making sure that our money is going to the right places. We're failing to do that right now, and the proof is in the deficit. So,
That's correct. The
what
controller's
do we do to
job
fix
is.
it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gio.
What are we going to do to fix it? I mean, where do we begin?
So everybody talks about waste, fraud, and abuse, but I want to stop it before it happens, and I want to get us back to a surplus. I want us to have a rainy day fund. I want us to have plenty on our plate because it's hard to give from an empty plate. And the truth is, we're taxed to the tune of $1.112 trillion every year. $806 billion leaves the state of California to head to other states, to head to other countries. We operate on about a $324 billion annual budget. But what we need to do is we need to start 6 steps that will get us back to a surplus: defund, divest, invest, reduce, eliminate, return. Defund these wasteful programs that we know are wasteful programs, divest away from systems of death, decay, and destruction, and invest into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Reduce the amount of spending that we send out, separate them into quarterly budgets instead of annual budgets, eliminate wasteful programs entirely, and then return people's money back to them. America was founded on tax rebellion. That's what this country was founded on, and yet we're paying, taxes, fees, registration, tolls, interest, inflation. We have so many different ways that we are separated from our money, and freedom is financial freedom. We're not free. We've been created all sorts of chains to exist within, and it's because people we don't no longer look at it the way that our forefathers did, which is extortion.
Right? Can
Taxes
you
are
break
extortion.
can you break down how it's going to benefit us from going from an annual budget to a quarterly budget?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question. So, what a lot of state programs, a lot of NGOs, a lot of government programs and entities operate on is an annual budget. Whether you're in the military, federally, or whether you work for the state government, and what that does is you have this budget that everybody wants to make sure that they use all of their resources. They spend all of their money. And so there's a rush to spend at the end of the annual year, at the end of the fiscal year. And so instead of doing that, I would put it on a quarterly budget, which means that you're going to get 25% of your budget to operate on for the next 90 days. And then that way it will eliminate the amount of panic spending, because in state entities, people are really worried that if they don't spend it, then they won't get the same budget next year. So it's not spending based on the need, it's spending based on wanting to get the money back again. And then so if we audit these government agencies through the controller's office, it will also give us an opportunity to assign them a credit rating, just like you have a credit rating. Hey, listen, if you're not good with your money, we're going to reduce your credit rating. And eventually we're going to reduce your funding. And then we're going to eliminate your funding. And then we're either going to get rid of your government agency entirely or replace it with a new entity. Because the thing is these systems are set up to serve the people. It's not set up to just create jobs for the sake of creating jobs. That's why we have so much bureaucracy to begin with. So quarterly budgets instead of annual budgets, real-time transparency, so that the moment that a dollar is being spent, you're seeing it in real time on the blockchain. So then, and that's something that Herb Morgan talks about, who's running for controller. Because then, whether it's big spending or small spending, whether it's the government office wanting to take everyone out to Starbucks, or whether it's them wanting to pay for a big training weekend that they don't need to pay for, when the people see their money being spent in real time, they're going to push back on it. And also, government employees are going to be more hesitant to spend that money to begin with.
David, you're offering transparency, and I have to push back because I don't know if we're allowed to have transparency when you consider the addition at the state capitol that we're not allowed to know how much has been spent on it.
Yeah, in fact, Governor Newsom has vetoed law after law requiring additional auditing over government funds that passed with both parties supporting it, coming through Sacramento, two separate laws that required additional oversight. But the truth is most people consider themselves fiscally conservative, whether they are social conservatives and fiscally conservative, or they say they're socially liberal and fiscally conservative. I want all of those people to understand that what we need to do is we need to take care of our money. We need to be a better steward of our money. I've never heard anyone say, I'm socially liberal and I'm also fiscally liberal. I want to spend more than we have. It's just not good. It's not good principle. It's not good theory. And so what I want to be able to do is to bring that radical transparency. So then that way, as the money is being spent in real time, you're being involved in the process so that you're also involved in auditing government spending. And one of the ways that we can do that is taking all of government money, all of your tax revenue that has been extorted from you, putting it into a trust at the beginning of the year. And then we spend out of the trust. Trusts have different rules for operations, different rules for taking money out of the trust. And then I would also do what a lot of real estate agents do, which is I quantify the amount of mineral wealth, resources, natural gas, water, and oil belong to the people. Because people get really freaked out when I talk about, government and oil and natural gas. But the truth is, all of that already belongs to us. It's on public land. And what happens is oil and gas companies, they get permits to extract the oil and gas, and they pay for it from us off of, like the 600 oil and gas permits right now on 200,000 acres of Bureau of Land Management land. And so I would quantify the amount of oil, just like Sheriff Bianco has said. We have more oil in California than we know what to do with. We have so much oil and lithium and uranium and water and natural resources that if we wanted to, we could completely eliminate the income tax. And I think that something that we should be working towards doing is eliminating taxes, income tax on the state level, property tax on the state level. We can't do anything about the county level, but starting to eliminate these taxes, fees, tolls, these ways in which separate you from your money, because we are so rich. We just have to quantify the amount of oil that we have in our soil so that people see it. Because when we find things like 500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, the first thing that the government does is outlaw gas stoves, because it's a plentiful resource. When we have more uranium than we know what to do with, well, what do? They sell off all of our uranium in 1992. And then you end up with government extracting uranium and sending it throughout elsewhere, and the Clintons getting in trouble for uranium one and, sending our uranium through Canada and skimming money off the top for the Clinton Foundation. So the truth is government has been involved, but it's just been doing a terrible job. And so quantify the amount of wealth that we have here so that the people know just how rich we are. Because when you realize how rich we are in California, the $324 billion annual budget, which has ballooned, doubled and tripled, over and over again for the last 10 years. When you look at the amount of money that we spend annually, that's way too much money, $324 billion. But then when you look at the $806 billion that's leaving every year, and then you look at the mineral wealth, there's no reason why we should be having Skid Row overrun with human debris, people struggling, people suffering. We shouldn't have 100,000 fentanyl overdoses every year. We shouldn't be overrun with illegal immigrants. Our schools should be the best in the world, the best in the country. There's so much wealth coming out of Silicon Valley, out of Los Angeles, so much human capital, so much infrastructure that our forefathers have created, and yet we're being fleeced. We're being robbed. We're being extorted, and it's time that we fight back.
Yeah, you had me at tolls. I live in the Bay Area, and dude, every day, I think the tolls right now are at $8.50. It hurts, along with
And
everything else going up.
that's a way to extract money from you every single day in these tolls. You paid to develop the public road to begin with. Who do these people think they are, slapping a toll lane
Fast
and then
track.
extracting more money from you on public land?
How many times are we getting taxed to drive? Taxed for polls, taxed for our fuel,
Mileage
taxed
tax.
for registration, taxed for
That's right.
buying a car. How many times can you tax an automobile?
Mileage tax now.
mileage tax. Which I'm sorry, David, I got to step in. They said that they're just researching it.
Mm. Volunteers. Who would
Yep.
volunteer? Yeah,
Yeah, you
they're
don't
out
research
there.
something unless you're gonna do it here in California.
Tax me harder, daddy.
Just a nice way to sneak it sneak it into law.
Mm.
Um, I like what you said about these programs and departments on how you want to audit them so that every time they come back for money, they're not coming back for the same amount or more when they don't need to come back for that much. So you're talking about, hey, let's cut the waste, just bring it down so that the taxpayers aren't paying as much.
Well, and there are also ways that you can eliminate fees for California residents and charge visitors, charge tourists, there's a reason why everyone who goes on vacation in California is from somewhere else, from another country, from
I
another
like that.
state. How often can we afford to go on vacation with our families? How often can you afford to go stay at Disneyland for 5 days?
Mm.
Are you kidding me? So Californians have been squeezed, from every direction. And one of the best things that we could do is give them access to our state parks for free. There's no reason why, with all the tax dollars that you spend, why you should have to spend additional money on state parks. When we invest about $1 billion annually in our state parks, but we get $7 billion back in return. That $7 billion, a lot of that comes from people that are traveling here from overseas, people are traveling here from other states. There's no reason why you, as a Californian, our forefathers, our grandfathers, established the state. They built the state. We pay taxes here our entire lives. Our state parks should be free for California residents, and then we charge a premium to people who are coming here from out of state or from out of country.
You gotta pay. Texans, you gotta pay.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
but they get you. You have to pay these day passes, because I like to go to the state parks. You got to pay for these day passes, and then they make them almost impossible to get. And then the place that you need to get a day pass from is closed. And then you're like looking everywhere to get a day pass. And then so you're like, okay, we're just going to park our car. I don't see anyone anywhere. And then you go off on a hike, you come back 2 hours later, and you got a $44 ticket. So it's this kind of stuff: the tickets, the tolls, the registration, the fees, things for like our state parks. We should be able to enjoy state parks. California should be able to enjoy state parks. And it should be something that you should be able to go camping. You should be able to go fishing. You should be able to go and enjoy yourself and your family without being raked over the coals when we're already being taxed to death.
Exactly. And it's not such a foreign idea.
Mhm.
Other states do it. When you
That's
look at your
correct.
bill at a
Fucking
hotel and it
tariffs.
says tourism tax, or
That's right.
I'm
Tourism
It's a
looking to go
tourism
tariffs.
tax.
I'm going to New York City to check out communism, see how great it is, and I'm looking at the Natural History Museum there, and they offer pay what you want to people that live in the state of New York.
Mhm.
We don't have that here.
No, we
That's
don't. There's not this sense of community here in California anymore. It's a sort of sense of, oh, it's all rugged individualism. And I get it. There's a time and a place for rugged individualism. I love me some rugged individualism. But, the people here in California, we are taxed to death. And what do we get for the 40% of our income that comes right off the top? And so it's an exhausting situation. They're always constantly looking for more ways to separate you from your dollar, but it's in everything. And so, I'm a big California first, America only person. I believe that our public programs should serve the American public. We've got 25% of the state, as Governor Newsom brags about, that wasn't born here, that are immigrants. And I believe that our public universities should serve the public. Our public schools should serve the public. Our public parks should serve the public, not a bunch of people from out of state, out of country, illegal immigrants. Why is California not going to work for Californians? Why in the richest state, in the richest country on earth, fourth largest economy on earth, are so many people struggling to put food in their children's mouths and struggling to keep a roof over their head?
exactly.
There's a lot of guys fleeing California.
I want to talk about some of these state boards that if you become the treasurer, you become a voting member of, like the State Lands Commission, the California Public Employees Retirement System, California state teachers retirement system, and just having the influence over pensions and investments. Um, why does that matter?
Well, so you've got CalSTRS, you got CalPERS, and one of them's $1 trillion in debt at this point. $1 trillion in debt. And so if you're a public employee, if you're a member of a public union, you need to understand that your money is being held in a trust, but what they're doing is they're constantly borrowing against it. We're constantly mortgaging tomorrow to pay for today. And I see somebody commenting online. I'm seeing these comments now. California is the best state in the union. You're absolutely right. California is the best state. I love it in California. I was born and raised here. I've been here my whole life. I've been to other states. I thought about leaving. I have no interest in leaving. This is the best state. I've got generations of Serpas here. And so, but
shout out Serpas.
No, sorry, go ahead, Christian.
No, I was just saying shout out family Serpa.
Yeah, freaking, shout out to the giant Serpa family, the entrenched Serpa family throughout the entire state of California, in Fresno, the Bay Area, the Sierra Nevadas, and down to San Diego. So we got a bunch of Serpas in California. What were you going to say, Christian?
Oh, I said fighters nonetheless.
Yeah, and so yeah, the CalPERS, CalSTRS, the teachers union. There's nothing that does not go through the teachers union, there's nothing that does not go through the treasurer's office. But in addition to that, they're also in charge of economic development programs, housing, education, healthcare. People don't realize that 73 cents out of every dollar that's spent on healthcare in the state of California comes through we, the people. They're in charge of, the community colleges, state colleges, university systems, community investment, water, energy, infrastructure, natural resources. And so the treasurer's office is the steward of the people's wealth, the manager of not just their debt, but their investment. And so if we were better stewards of our wealth, if we had people that were better benefactors instead of being beneficiaries of government, we'd have people that cared a little bit more about the people that live here. Yeah, and then this guy said I had properties in red states that are basically like third world countries. Yeah, no, I hear you. And the truth is I don't want money to be leaving California to go to any other states. Not red states, blue states, not other countries.
Mexico.
People get this thing a little bit twisted with me when I talk about California. I love California. I'm very aware it's a blue state. I'm also very aware that about 37 of our 50 states are welfare states. Only 13 states pay more taxes to the federal government than they take away. And so we need to have people who are standing up for Californians who are paying that $1.112 trillion in taxes every year to not only other countries that don't like us very much, but to other states that don't like us very much, because we're funding other countries that have free healthcare, that have free college, that have public water and infrastructure and energy systems, and we don't have any of that. But we're paying for healthcare and we're paying for education in other countries.
Well, I saw, I think 34 million in grants to support dismantling ICE to Sherla, 20 million to get them a brand new headquarters.
To get who a new headquarters?
CHIRLA, Sherla.
Okay. Yeah, there's so much money being spent. It's incredible the amount of money that's being spent. But that's what I say when people say we need more audits. We've had so many audits, and look at all this waste, fraud, and abuse. Look at this. Look at that. Okay.
Yeah. What are we doing about it?
Prosecute.
What are we doing about these audits?
You're right.
Prosecute. You can't manage the people's trust without the people's trust. You can't manage and have faith in government when people don't have any faith in government. And so at that point, you've got to just start returning money to people. You have to start practicing radical transparency. If we were our own country, we would be the fourth largest economy in the world. And so we are in many ways a nation state, but we aren't acting like it. Exactly. California seems to be doing really well, but Californians are absolutely struggling.
David, you seem to know a lot about the job, but what's keeping us from having a Dave Serpa as California State Treasurer right now? We lost you.
You're on mute. You're
I
on
lost,
mute.
I lost David. Can you hear us, David?
There
Can you hear me now?
There you go. I
Can hear you now.
We can hear you now.
Okay,
So-
sorry,
so-
I had to put it on mute.
So the
there
question
to ask my
was,
kid to quiet down. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I could totally
Okay,
hear
so
you.
what's
And
stopping me?
we can't hear anything in the background.
What?
We don't hear any. I don't hear anything in the background. You hear anything, Christian?
No, you're good.
And now I don't hear you at all.
You're on mute again.
Okay,
You're
There
good.
you go.
all right.
You're good.
Now
Yeah.
we've got it. Okay, so what's stopping David Serpa from becoming California State Treasurer
Yeah,
right
man.
now?
What's in the way? What do we gotta? What barriers do we have to knock down?
Carl DeMaio. Carl DeMaio is what's in the way. And so Carl DeMaio, for whatever reason, hates me. He called
Are you
me
saying
a
you're not on his
lunatic.
list? You're not on his list?
He told my volunteers that I'm crazy. He said that I'm going to embarrass the California Republican Party. And I'm just thinking, brother, if you're not embarrassed by the Republican Party in the state of California, you have no shame and maybe too much pride. Maybe you need to start really thinking about who you are here. If you are not driven to a point of being a lunatic by what's going on in California and the fact that we can't put on an effective fight, an efficient fight because we're so ineffective as a party, brother, you should be ashamed. And I don't understand what it is about Carl DeMaio that makes him the spokesperson of the Republican Party. All I hear is this guy talking about my friend Steve Hilton, my friend Gloria Romero. And he's talking so poorly about Bianco, but I don't understand how he can pretend that he's neutral about Bianco when he asked Jennifer Hawks to run for California State Treasurer when she donated $21,450 to Steve Hilton's campaign. And so is it all about money and influence for Carl and whatever he can get for his little bag of gold? And the truth is I'm starting to hear this time and time again because I'm not the only person. He unendorsed me when I was the Republican nominee. There was no other Republican I was running against Takano. He did the same thing to Mike Cargile, unendorsed him, wrote anyone but Serpa, anyone but Takano. And so the truth is he's a gatekeeper of, young Christian men and, straight men. He wants to go ahead and, white men. He is very enthusiastic about all these boomers and betas and whatnot. And I just think that most of us are tired of the weak representation that we're getting from the Republican Party, how weak Carl DeMaio is when he's trying to put up a fight. It's all become about fundraising. And I'm tired of hearing about the fundraising when 100% of my House Republican members, 9 out of 9, voted to block the release of the Epstein files. What are you? The Republican Party is you're making it very difficult for me and for other people that are very engaged to stand up for you guys when you release the Epstein files and they're so heavily redacted. And so I don't pal around with people who protect perverts and pedophiles. That's a Carl DeMaio game. He's in the swamp. He's with all those dudes. I'm not going to dangle my leg out for money.
I gotta have you bring it back, David.
I'm not an ad reader. I'm not a political prostitute. These OnlyFans Republicans that are constantly selling these monthly subscriptions and these, hey, just, if I dangle my leg out a little further, or if I spread my cheeks a little bit more, maybe you could donate a little bit more money. Shut up, do your job, stop begging us for money, and stop gatekeeping good Republicans from running for office.
David, I gotta have you bring it back a second. How many Republicans voted against releasing the Epstein files?
9 out of 9, 100% of our House Republican members voted against releasing the Epstein files.
I don't like that.
In California.
In California. So that's, Calvert, Isa, Lamar,
Name them.
Kylie.
Name them.
Yeah, Steele, every single one of them. And so I'm not here to get in bed with people that, they want to quote scripture when they hang out in church, but millstone and all that, right, brothers? Millstone and all that, right? And so I'm tired of protecting these pedophiles. And the thing is, it's not just a buzzword for me. I was in South Central freaking, Los Angeles off of Figueroa and the Blade over the weekend, with Steve Hilton, trying to highlight the human trafficking issue that's happening right in California, in Los Angeles, where we're having sex slavery happening, in broad daylight. Everybody knows about it. And so I'm just not here to make peace with evil. I'm here to destroy evil. I'm not here to make peace with these people. At this point, good seed cannot grow in the Republican Party because we have too many weeds.
Mhm.
We have too many rocks in the soil preventing good plants from taking root and growing. And so, just like your people are saying online, it's a uniparty. It's up to us. You're absolutely 100%. It's all of them. And so it's the Republicans and the Democrats. Everybody blocks it when they get in power. How many times do we hear, Kash Patel talking about releasing the Epstein files and all these different people, Dan Bongino, and then they get in there
And
and they
Bondi.
fold like a cheap freaking towel.
It's on
And
my desk.
so I'm just done funding it. I'm done spending the money on it. If we could go after the money, we could end a lot of the problems before they get started.
Yeah,
How's the Dow
I'm
doing?
I'm really sickened right now, David. You brought up the big thing that pisses me off. The thing that the president keeps saying, there's nothing there, and it's bullshit because we know it is. Um, I'm the Epstein file frustrates me because we know there's names in there, we know there's elites in there, and we want them to be burned at the stake. You don't fuck with kids.
That's right. That's right. No, we don't want to pull punches with these Epstein file perverts. And what is coming directly out of the White House is they're saying, if we unredacted all of the names, the government would fall. If our government
So
pillars
be
are
it.
built on the backs of pedophilia and perverts and eating children and having inappropriate relationships with children, let it crumble. Let me make it very clear. We're not here to make peace with evil. And so, no, I'm not going to pal around with these people. I'm not their friends. And that's one of the reasons why I freak everybody out in the Republican Party is I'm very iconoclastic in nature. I don't want to have friends. I mean, you saw the Zoom meeting that I released the other day. Everyone was like, I was getting blackmailed, oh, I'm going to release this Zoom meeting of you having a mental breakdown. No, brother, that's just the way I conduct myself. You've
I
seen it with
I
me on
I
these
saw
They
the
interviews.
love
video.
to call
You're being
geniuses
such a
crazy.
stranger.
David, we've all seen the video. I've even shared it in my stories. I didn't think it was a mental breakdown. I didn't think there was anything to expose there.
Nothing to expose, everything in the world to promote. And I told him, I said, he said he was going to release it. I said, I'll slap my brand on it. And I released it the next day. I'm not here to hide anything from anyone. I've been very transparent about my race from the beginning. It makes me very different from everyone else in the race because every phone call that I've ever had, I'll tell you about all of it. If you want to ask me a question, just make sure that you want the answers because I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right before we got on, I was seeing on Twitter, a whole bunch of sources were saying that Bill Gates just apologized to his company for, being involved with the Epstein files and, the apparent Russian women he was having affairs with. And he says he didn't really do anything malicious, Nine
Yeah,
out
so
of
if he's
nine is disheartening.
apologizing, that's an
Yeah.
admission of guilt, it sounds like to me. Maybe he should be getting prosecuted.
I,
And
I,
so,
yeah.
he apparently snuck his wife some medication because, of some sexually transmitted disease that he came into contact with that he brought back home. And so I want prosecutions. I don't want apologies. I want these names to be unredacted. I want these people to be held accountable because one of the things that President Trump talked about in his State of the Union address tonight was he talked about a new golden age starts now, and he talked about national success, and he said that in America right now there's a crisis of trust, and I couldn't help but think, yeah, there's a crisis of trust. We're talking about declassifying these UFO UPO whatever files before we're talking about declassifying the Epstein files. And so we're not in a position where we're ready to trust our government right now anymore. People are at the very edge of a very long rope. I don't think that this is the kind of thing that we can pew our way out of. So it's going to require being dedicated to the cause for a long period of time and being willing to pledge to one another our lives. You have to be willing to die for it. Our 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 fortunes, you have to be willing to lose your money. You have to be willing to lose your finances. You cannot worship two masters. And then our sacred honor. You have to be willing to be dragged, to be called a white supremacist, white nationalist, Christian nationalist, anti-Semite. I can't tell you how many of the people that I hang out with that have been called white nationalists, 60% of them are Hispanics. We're tired of the name calling, the mudslinging, the muck raking. We want to get to the bottom of it. We're tired of the games. We're tired of politics being treated like professional wrestling around these cults of personality where we either hero worship or we villainize, but we never get anything done. And people are tired and we're exhausted. We're frustrated. And I would say that we're ready to start to kick things off, to start for things becoming more and more violent, but it's already been happening. You had the healthcare CEO who was schwacked by Mangione. You've got CEOs that are getting taken out. People are tired, and there's this clip that's going around about me, and I posted it. It's becoming not against the haves versus the have-nots, but the have-nots versus the have-yachts. And Republicans are taking that. They're like, oh, David Serpa, he's against the people who have yachts. I've never heard a bunch of people that make less than $50,000 stomp so hard for billionaires in my life. We're talking a bunch of people who were fleeced during COVID. The lower and middle class lost $1 billion a day while a new billionaire was created every single day. You talk about some of the most heavily subsidized people, the biggest welfare queens in America are billionaires. And so I'm sick of subsidizing these welfare queens, these billionaires. I'm sick of my party, the Republican Party, sticking up for these people. We're supposed to be the party of trickle-down economics. We're supposed to be the party of millionaires that create other millionaires. We're supposed to be the party of blue-collar people, middle-class people, lower-class people, working-class people. But now, all of a sudden, because, at the 11th hour when, Pennsylvania was being called for Trump and a bunch of billionaires saw the writing on the wall, they want to come over and start donating to Trump and sitting around a table with Trump. People better remember that MAGA was a bunch of blue-collar, working-class Joes that delivered this country for President Trump, and we don't want to be left out of its success in this golden age. And so we are not billionaire worshipers. We are, the party of the working class. That being said, I'm not here to tax anyone to death. That's not what I want to do. I believe in tax rebellion, but I'm not here to exchange government oligarchs and government kings for corporate overlords that make me bow even lower. So freedom is financial freedom. Are we financially free? Or are we being created more and more chains, more and more economic infrastructure that prevents us from having free time, free evenings, free weekends, vacations, time to spend with our families, time to be idle? And no, we don't. Everyone that I know is working 2 jobs and has a side hustle. And that doesn't look like the American dream here in California.
No, and you see it time and time again. The last time I saw people simping, they were simping for the pharmaceutical companies.
That's
you
right.
know?
Yeah, hey, listen, this is the Republican Party. If you want to go simp for big pharma, that's the Democrats. If you want to go simp for big business and big agriculture, that's the Democrats. There's a party for you. Overwhelmingly, the Democratic Party is the party of billionaires. We had a few billionaires like Elon Musk that helped us push it over. But what happened was the Democratic Party overwhelmingly is not just the party of billionaires, they're historically the party of slavery. And they're doing it again and again. We see the sex slavery in Los Angeles. We see the economic slavery in the hotels, in the agriculture, in the fields. They are banking off of marginalized people, which is always what the Democratic Party has done. But, Republicans, I'm coming for you too. Democrats get rich off of the poor, and Republicans get rich off of war. And I'm sick of all of it. I want our money to be put into the creation of our home, not the destruction of our neighbors.
Mhm.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, David, because I've been talking in the background with a lot of folks and telling them I am sick of how things are going in California and
Mhm.
how weak the Republican Party has been.
That's right.
And whenever we have a fighter that comes out and talks and says the things we want to hear, they shut him up. He's not going to go anywhere. They don't move him through the ranks. We need
That's right.
fighters,
They
though. But
rug
we need
pull
a
them.
fighter. We need
The
somebody that's going to
California
go out there and
Republican
call it out.
Party, if you're a grassroots candidate, if you pick up legitimate steam, there are so many gatekeepers out there that are going to work to rug pull you. And look, this is nothing new. Rachel Hamm experienced it when she ran for Secretary of State. Eric Early experienced it when he ran for Senate, and they launched Steve Garvey as a sacrificial lamb at the 11th hour. I've been experiencing it now with Jennifer Hawks, a Steve Hilton donor who's, about 70 years old out of Palo Alto. Dennis Fiatosa, who's running for Congress out in LA, is experiencing it in his race. Amy Fan West, who's running for Congress out in Orange County, is experiencing it. And so the thing is every single one of us, whether it is Riverside County, whether it is Orange County, LA County, or San Diego County, anyone who's about 45 years old and younger gets treated like a baby, like we're children, like we don't belong at the table. When America was at its finest, we were being led by people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Now
Yeah.
we are being led by people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and the boomers refuse to give up the reins. But what's so interesting about this is the oldest crowds that I speak with, the rooms filled with the most boomers. I tell them we need Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, younger people to step in and lead in this country. Those are the rooms that applaud the loudest. And yet we keep ending up with candidates listen, you and I, we all know that the Slate idea was my idea. Chad Bianco said it a couple of days ago on a podcast. We all know that it wasn't Steve Hilton's idea. It was David Serpa's idea, and that's fine. But what happened was Steve isn't even being a good steward of the golden ticket. What's happening is, and he is now, he's decided he's not going to grow it any further in some ways. But what happened was Steve had asked me to join the golden ticket. He'd asked me to run for treasurer. And then
The
all of a
golden
sudden, Paul
ticket.
DeMaio gets in his ear and tells him after my meeting I went with Pastor Jack and with Gina and with Mike and Mike Gates and Steve Hilton. I talked to Steve afterwards. We talked about launching my campaign. And the next thing I know, Carl DeMaio is trying to run somebody for treasurer against me. But I told Steve, I said, you can't continue to let Carl take over the golden ticket because you're the one that's known for it. And he's taking the golden ticket, which was started with good intentions, and he's turning it into the golden years ticket. We don't need a bunch of people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s to be leading the country, leading our state, leading the Republican Party. For the love of God, Carl DeMaio, it is not all about you and your boomers and the money that they donate to you. It's not all about people who are willing to write big checks. We have to have people go into government that are patriots, that are willing to die for it. We don't need another weekend at Bernie's Joe Biden situation where we're propping people up and doing everything that we can for them to create a social media platform and a presence just because you're scared of David Serpa, Carl.
I find it interesting because, David, I'm not going to bullshit you. I like Carl for the fact that he is willing to put in the work and go up and down the state for things like Prop 50. He's bringing attention to this California gas, this mileage tax. He's working on the
The
California
workhorse.
voter ID. He's a workhorse. But when you're backing people that have been there forever and have done nothing and are just losers, and we're over here talking to people like, hey, we want to win now. And we want to we let's not pretend like the GOP of the United States has done shit for us here in California. We are the redheaded stepchild. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If the contiguous other 48 states had their choice, California would break off and fall off into the ocean. But let's be realistic. California
Yeah.
has the
So
most registered
listen,
Republicans.
Carl is a broken clock. A broken clock's right twice a day. We're grateful for the work that he's putting in. His show's just about unwatchable. You have to put the volume all the way down because his voice is insufferable. He's like rancid water in a desert. It's like, yeah, it's water. Yeah, I need to drink from it, but am I going to get sick from it? Yeah, probably. And he's making the Republican Party sick because you look at all of his donors in the clubs that they belong to and the organizations they're part of, it doesn't represent conservative Republican Party ideals. And so we can't be surprised when we're being led astray by someone who does not represent our ideals. And so, yeah, voter ID, great, wonderful. Thanks, Carl. Maybe talk about something else. But the other thing is he's such a fundraiser. He's such a pick-me. He's such a, he's got his leg dangled so far out. He's always talking about money that I think he's got all these different financial organizations, but when you go to donate to Reform California, all these people are shocked that it comes back to a donation to Carl for Assembly. All these people are shocked when he goes and he fills out some paperwork wrong, but he still takes the donations. So I've got so many people reaching out to me and sending me their Carl DeMaio stories, but he wants to be the Republican Don. This gentleman that's commenting, he wanted to run. He said he ran and they brought in a candidate against him in San Bernardino County. It's everywhere. San Bernardino County, Riverside County, San Diego County, LA County, Orange County. The gatekeepers are everywhere. They want a bunch of people to come up through the system. And he's not a Don. He's not the boss. He's put himself into that position by gathering a tremendous amount of information from people so that he has this information that he can tap into. But the thing is if you are going to continue to gatekeep straight white Republican Christians from office, strong Republican men from office, strong Christians from office, you can't be surprised when that pendulum swings back and knocks you right off of the boat that you thought you were steering.
What are we going to do, David, to break this habit from? I mean, the Democrats do it and the Republicans do it.
That's right. Yeah, and
These
I've heard
fighters
people
that want
say
to go in there.
they don't want me mudslinging at DeMaio, and I apologize to jump in there. But Sheriff Bianco, I've probably heard him speak more than just about anyone else over the last 3 years, and he said something perfect. He said, "Listen, Democrats are great at attacking Republicans. Republicans are also great at attacking Republicans."
Yeah.
So I understand, but I tried peace with Carl for 3 years. I tried to get together with him for 3 years. I called him so many different times. And what happened was I had one of my volunteers call him because he's a delegate. He called her back in 3 minutes. She's probably in her 60s. Called her back in 3 minutes, chewed her up one side and down the other, apologized that David Serpa has put you in this situation, and he degraded her, he demeaned her, he yelled at her. And so I don't have any sympathy for Carl. And I had somebody say in the comments, "Oh, well, you know what? You Republicans, anytime that I see Republicans fighting, I say, you guys should fight for charity. Say when. Say less." I'll do it at the CAGOP. We could fight it for charity in front of a group of our peers. We could run it as a fundraiser, which I know that Carl likes. A lot of people would probably pay good money to see that happen. We could do it at the CAGOP. But if he doesn't want any of this action, which I know he doesn't because he's such a beta, I'd still debate him. I'll debate Jennifer Hawks on his show. I'll debate Carl DeMaio at the CAGOP. Pick your poison. You want to be beaten intellectually or physically? Because I'm down for either one, just as long as we do it as a fundraiser.
He's a tall boy, Serpa. He's a tall boy.
I'm a big boy. I'm a whole lot of beef. I'm a tall drink of water. I've got a long reach on me. I'm a combat veteran. Yum,
machine gunner.
I'm a killer. I went and I shot human beings on the other side of the world. There's a blood debt, brother. It's a blood debt. I mean it.
I think you need to reach out to Trump, and we got to have you on the White House lawn for UFC. That'd be a good one right there.
Get it set up for UFC. Carl and I will both wear suits. We'll do a big fundraiser for the CAGOP. We'll pass around a hat. I think it could be good for everybody,
Yeah.
except for Carl.
Jeez. I I wanted to get into the State of the Union because it just ended right before we started the podcast, and he brought up a lot of things, tooting his own horn for a lot of things. Inflation at the lowest rate in 5 years.
Mm.
Oh, thank God. Prices are going up really slowly still. What are your thoughts, David?
Well, look, I like the golden age starts now stuff. We really need to start looking at the golden age of capitalism and what those numbers actually produced. The top effective tax rate for billionaires at that point was actually 94%. And it created a tremendous amount of liquidity in the markets because people were spending their money, not hoarding their money, investing them in real companies and not these sort of shell companies, these ghost companies. And so the golden age, I'm about it. I'm about a new renaissance. I really am. I hope that he's right and that it will start now. He talks about being a national success, being a proud, prosperous, free nation. Those are the kind of things that people, I'm a nationalist. I want America to thrive. I want people to be proud of America. I want people to be proud of the American flag. But, that goes back to that crisis of trust that he talked to, which really a lot of people feel has been breached through the Epstein files. So, he needs to lead with that, with the transparency. I do think that if he delivers on a lot of what he talked about, the health, the education, this being the place where the change is going to happen today. A lot of people forget he's only been in for a year, and there was a lot of damage that was done before he got in there. Facing the cartels, designating them foreign terrorist organizations was, very intelligent because it gives him more parameters in dealing with them both abroad and here on American soil. Declaring a national emergency around energy and becoming an exporter, not just in energy, but also in manufacturing and in automobiles. He talked about revitalizing Doge, which it didn't work the first time. I don't know if it's going to, what should have happened was they should have kept Doge and then Congress should have made it permanent. Bringing law and order to the cities, having a merit-based economy, a military sole purpose, which was defeating enemies, a lot of things that are good. But then he also talked about foreign policy. And in foreign policy, the Don and I, we disagree a little bit. And that's okay. It's okay for me to disagree on foreign policy and still, not hate a Republican. But he talks about this Monroe Doctrine. He calls it the Donroe Doctrine, the Gulf of America. And I equate this Gulf of America thing with when we were going to change French fries to freedom fries. It's like, okay, who cares? But, I'll call them freedom fries if you want.
I like the Gulf of America.
Everybody else. But then, we talk about, going into Venezuela. I think that was orchestrated with, so that he could be extracted without any deaths. We talk about Panama Canal, Greenland. There's this whole hemispheric approach that President Trump has taken to national defense that, while I understand it, I do believe that the 800 foreign military bases that we already have stretch us thin. And so, we talked about increasing the Department of War budget. When the Department of War has actually failed 7 consecutive audits, and he talked about increasing their budget from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. So the truth is, though, is at the end of the day, Trump is part of another generation where he remembers an America that was from a greater generation, a generation that went off to World War II, came back, built America, built a huge housing boom, popped out a bunch of kids, stabilized an economy, built a booming middle class, and then a bridge from the lower to middle to upper class, brought about an American dream that everyone could participate in, and created avenues for that. And that's what a lot of people are actually lacking right now, is a lot of those things. And so he is a throwback to another time, and I appreciate him for that, but I'm also not a hero worshiper. And so I see him as a tool, an effective tool, an efficient tool for certain things, but he's moving the ball forward. We've got to pick it up, and we've got to continue to move it forward because, it's not just about MAGA anymore. The new movement is America first, America only. We don't want to just make America great again. We want to make America the best place on earth by not spending any of our blood, money, human capital, or infrastructure outside of our borders.
You made me start daydreaming then when you started talking about the golden generation there. I I didn't get to experience that. I've only read about it, so
Right. That's right, man. I graduated from high school homeless. We lived in Section 8 housing. I was raised by a single mother that worked 3 jobs. I graduated from high school in 2003. Had it, 2 years after the World Trade Center collapsed. A few years later, we saw the housing boom. The housing collapse. I saw Hollywood go on strike, the Writers Guild go on strike. It killed Los Angeles. When I was working in LA, the housing boom recycled everyone's wealth. The .com boost, recycled everyone's wealth. COVID recycled everyone's wealth. And so we have these artificial boom and bust markets that are organized by big capital to reset the lower and middle class's wealth. And so we have to have some people that are willing to stand up for us. And we can't have a bunch of people that, quite honestly, don't worship God, and I wouldn't have said that probably 3 years ago, but I'm at a point now to where it's like, man, either you worship God or you worship money. You can't serve 2 masters. We need somebody to go in there and get control of the money that understands what it represents to the people. And that's their blood, their sweat, their time, the investment of our grandfathers and our forefathers that built the infrastructure, the nuclear facilities, the amazing city of Los Angeles, the city of San Francisco, the city of Sacramento. We've got some of the most beautiful cities, some of the most beautiful, geography in the world here in California. Some of the most beautiful things that were built here in California, and we're just watching it all crumble. And it's very demoralizing. But it is a psyop. They're trying to break us by making our surroundings ugly, by making it so that they destroy us mentally, physically, spiritually, financially, so that we continue to drive by homeless people. We continue to drive by children that are now in Skid Row. I just saw that bit by Nick Shirley, a 12-year-old in Skid Row. When I would sleep in a car with my family, when we would go and shower at friends' houses, I was an anomaly. I was an exception. I was not the rule. Now we're seeing more and more children that are going to bed hungry, that are graduating without purpose, without direction, without hope. And we're creating financial traps for them everywhere. I mean, not only do we not believe in education, we now believe in student loans. So we had free education for Californians up until 1968. It was the dream of Thomas Jefferson realized here in the state of California. What a beautiful thing. We sold it out for a bag of gold. We used to believe in home ownership here in California. You used to be able to buy a house for 3 times your annual wages. Now it's about 11 times your annual wages. You buy your average home for $900,000, and then your interest, just an interest on a $900,000 home in 30 years, you pay $1.2 million in interest. If you got a 2% tax rate, you're paying $18,000 a year in taxes. If it's 1.5, $12,000 a year in taxes. So, $16,000 a year in tax, whatever it is. We're spending all this money in interest, taxes, fees, insurance, if we can even get it. So the American dream, our education system, it's all under attack. The USDA homestead, when we had our biggest housing boom in American history, we had the Sears catalog. We had people buying housing that was manufactured off-site. They put it together on-site, and that cost about 3 times your annual wages at that time. Now you could buy, it's making a return through TikTok, through Amazon, through Tesla, through Home Depot. People are looking at a lot of these places that they're selling 2-bedroom homes manufactured off-site for about $30,000. You could buy a piece of land for about $30,000. So you get a $60,000 home. You upset the entire system if we just made that legal. But what we did was we made all of this alternative style housing illegal, because we don't believe in the American dream. We don't believe in home ownership. We believe in home loans. And so we want you to take out a $900,000 home loan. We don't want you to get debt free. We don't want you to build multiple structures on one piece of land for you and your family so that through generations you can create generational wealth. We want it reset. And
Well,
that's a lot to deal with.
Well, Serpa, you touched a little bit about, all the military bases that we have, and you mentioned we're spread thin, and, how we need to believe in God and how, we need to have America first.
Mhm.
And I had to look up this quote because, it was ringing true in my head. And I really only know this quote, probably heard it on Joe Rogan or something, but I had to look it up, and it's from Voltaire, right? It says, uh, the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. Are we spread thin? Is that where you see us now? I mean, you're talking about home ownership. Um, I see, I'm around all over the Bay Area, Central Valley, everywhere, and I see foreigners killing it,
Mhm.
killing it, buying all these new construction homes, two, three stories and Lathrop, and then what's going on here?
So, it's interesting that you brought that up because we talk a lot about the Roman Empire. But what's very interesting about that is often republics throughout history, from Rome to modern day America, their treasuries collapse before their empire does. So their coin, their financial, their banking, they overinflate their currency, they overextend their military, and so they end up falling from within. Many years before they actually collapse, they start falling. And so, but I'm sorry, Christian, I didn't answer the other part of your question though. What did you ask?
Now, is that where we're at that state? I mentioned, the just the housing market. I see a certain, just foreigners making a killing, and I don't necessarily see. I don't
Americans.
know who am I to call people American, but
No, no.
it's
Hey,
just
but because you're an American, and so the
yeah,
thing is we got this sort of mentality where it's like, oh, who are we to call ourselves American on stolen land, brother? You're American. We don't need to feel ashamed about being
right.
American. California was purchased. Texas was purchased. It was before then. It was established as a bear flag in the Bear Flag Revolt. At the end of the day, I'm so proud to be a Californian. I'm so proud to be an American. In California, we were founded by radical Republicans. Republicans back then were the most radical. They were the abolitionists. They were the anti-slavery party. They were the party of John Brown and John C. Fremont. Fremont up there in Northern California. He was one of our first two state senators. He was the first Republican nominee for president. He was a radical abolitionist, and he introduced the Fremont Emancipation years before the Lincoln Emancipation. And so, I'm telling you, a slave-free state, established in our republic. We never had slaves here in California. Nobody was ever a slave here in California. And so I am not ashamed of this country. And also, I talk to people who are like, yeah, well, if Mexico would have X, Y, and Z, they should have built the wall. They should have built a wall. If Mexico would have built a wall, maybe we would still be speaking Spanish in California, but it didn't happen. And so now we need to build a wall, and we need to be unforgiving
We have
about
to
our
take
borders,
Baja,
our
California.
language, our culture.
David, they didn't have enough time to build a wall when
I'm just playing
California
with
was
you.
Mexico.
Well,
Yeah,
Gio,
20 something years. They couldn't have built the wall. You muted yourself again.
You know what made me sick to my stomach today?
check, check,
You know
check.
what I
There you
heard?
go.
I heard a little something about your boy over there. Uh, Reparations in California? Is there a
Oh
certain
God, I
candidate
saw
that's
that.
what is
I,
this?
I didn't want to
What
bring it
is
up. I need
what
to
is
fact check
this?
it. In the
Yeah.
world of
Yeah,
AI and
so
editing,
look, Hilton's my boy. Bianco's my boy. I like both of these guys. I love both of these guys. Reparations in California, you must be out of your damn mind. We never owned slaves here. Nobody here was ever a slave here. The thing is race is the cousin of economics. But because we don't know how to talk economics, we
Right.
fall back on race because it's easier. The systems that were built through economics were eventually applied to all of us. And so, yeah, no, I'm absolutely, I don't, this guy said he doesn't like walls. I like a strong border presence. I hear you. I do like walls. I am a nationalist, especially with everything that's happening in Mexico right now. I don't really want it spilling over into our streets. And so,
Mm.
but when it comes to foreigners buying land here and buying up California, I'm in real estate. I can tell you it happens a lot because there's a lot of money being sent here, especially from China, to buy up real estate because we've overly commoditized our housing. But it's still more accessible and still more financially lucrative for people to buy here than it is for them to buy in China. And so I believe that unless you're a citizen here in California, you shouldn't be able to obtain housing. We should have e-verify not just for employment, where you should be able to prove that you're a citizen in order to obtain employment, but also for housing. You should prove that you're a citizen in order to obtain housing. And if you can't do those things, then it would behoove you to self-deport.
Yeah,
I
I
love
you
that.
know
I
what?
love that.
Something else that I went ahead and saw was like the governor of Arizona, right? Vetoed a bill for, that stops prevents China from buying land near military bases.
That's what
That's
we need to do.
All over the
The thing
state,
is
not just
China
military
owns
bases.
so much of our farmland, but do you know who owns more farmland than China in America?
Billy.
Canada.
Oh, can't
So
what?
I don't care who it is, whether
I
it's
don't like that.
Canada or whether it's China or whether it's Newfoundland or whatever. I don't give a crap who it is. Chile. I don't want anyone to own our farmland except for Californians. Because at one point, Californians owned our own farmland. We exported throughout the world, and people that had smaller farms made a living doing just that. There's a whole history of agrarian justice in this country, which is all about farming justice. And, the history of the state of California was free soil, free labor, free men, free Mont. And it was this whole element where California, you could go and you could start a farm and it could be your own farm. And you weren't going to have to compete against slave labor, which was at the time big agriculture. Big agriculture in the state of California is still essentially using slave labor in a shadow class of people.
Man, I was just talking about this today.
Yeah.
I was just talking about this today.
Talk about it again.
I'm so fed up. You want to open that can of worms? I'm so fed up with these people that don't want to talk about immigration from a common sense point of view, because whatever road you want to go down with immigration, you're going to hurt somebody's feelings.
Hmm.
The Republicans want to deport everybody. How are you going to deport everybody? I get that it's racist to say that we have this shadow the shadow people that move in the fields, this slave labor, modern day slave labor in the fields. We can't pretend like they're not there. Like, Americans are not going and picking up those jobs. It's just a fact.
Well, listen. I disagree with you. I understand where you're coming from, but I disagree with you. The thing is I do want to talk about immigration. I'm not one of those people that's going to shy away from it. I don't think that we need slaves in order for our economy to focus or function. If you need slaves, your economy deserves to crash. If you need slave labor in order for your farm to function, you better sell it because you're a garbage businessman. But the problem is all of these farmers are all being pushed into the same place, because if they don't use that labor, then they get pushed behind. And so what we do is we subsidize these programs where we'll actually give people taxpayer funds in order to hire immigrants from other countries and to pay them less than they would American workers. So the thing is if you chop up the way that you pay differently, like I've worked on a cherry ranch, I worked on an apple ranch. I shoveled horse crap. I worked in El Dorado County and in Northern California. I've been around this stuff. I'm no stranger to it. The thing is if you pay people a decent amount of money, they'll work. But also what we need to do is not have, people competing with slave labor, but get more people into farming through something called the USDA loan, which is a farming and agriculture loan. And we need to open up more of the map to the USDA farmers and then give them enough water and enough energy so that they can provide abundance for people. We should have so much food being locally sourced that it's not traveling 2,500 miles to get to your plate. The problem is that California produce is exported at a premium. And so when you go to the grocery store, you're not often seeing California produce. You're seeing produce from other countries. But then you go to other countries, and the entities that oversaw the USDA, that made sure, the FDA that made sure that all of our food and our agriculture was all grown so cleanly, all of that food goes to other countries, and then we import from the rest of the world.
I'm stuck on something you said, and I'm gonna need some information on this, David. You said that there are programs that pay for illegal immigrants to come and or not for immigrants to come and pick it at a lower wage than Americans?
Yeah, so look at Tyson Farms, for example. The meat packing industries are one of the biggest industries that do it, and in fact, I almost want to just fact check it right here online. But the thing is what they do is they pay. I think it's $9,000 per employee that comes in, and it's not the Bracero Act. The Bracero Act is a different act entirely, and I'm not even really about seasonal immigration. I'm not really even a big legal immigration fan. I don't want 600,000 Chinese students entering our university system. I don't need a bunch of seasonal labor entering into the workforce. I do believe in nationalization, e pluribus unum, from many one, the melting pot, all that good stuff. But if you're not going to, assimilate, I don't really want you here. And so, and that's what's happening right now is you have a lot of people that are more proud of where they come from than where they've moved to.
Right.
And what's so interesting about that is when I talk about immigration, the people who often agree with me the most are immigrants, are
Yeah.
people that came here legally, came here the right way, struggled to get here, and made a life for themselves.
Right. No, and I was just talking to my friend today, where in California, America, we incentivize the people to not assimilate, right? We give them their little China, we give them little Mexico. We, it's but where's little America? Or big, I don't see it. We have to
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're all America.
yeah.
Yeah.
I got into an argument yesterday because um, we had an organization reach out, and they have Democrat leaders on that side, and they were like, we see you guys as moderate Republicans, and I said, well, wait a second, I'm not going to allow you to label me like that. I get enough online with people calling me libtard or magtard or far right Republican.
Trump tard, all the
Yeah,
tards.
I get enough of that. I don't need to myself put a label on myself. I don't even allow people to call me Mexican American because I'm just American. Because if I go to Mexico, they don't consider me Mexican.
Mm-mm.
I'm American. That's it. So if I don't allow you to call me Mexican American, what the hell makes you think that I'm going to allow you to call me a moderate Republican? Like, it took me a long time to get here. I started out as a Democrat, and
No.
I slowly worked into becoming a Republican. And you're not going to take that away from me by calling me moderate. Like no, you're not going to make the Democrat Party look like a bunch of oh, we're we're the normal people, and they're the crazies over there. But luckily there's some moderate ones over there. Like, no, that's bullshit, because
I mean, at this
everybody
point,
has left the Democrat Party
you
because
could
they're
call me whatever the hell you want to call me. I get so tired of the name calling. To one group, I'm a rhino. To another group, I'm a MAGA extremist. To another, Christian nationalist, anti-Semite, racist, homophobic. Just all the different things. I get so sick of it. Go ahead and call me a radical. I am a radical. I am right wing. I am all these things that you're accusing me of being. But the truth is that's where the youth is headed. They are tired of watching their country getting sold out. They're tired of being told that they need to be ashamed about everything that they are, everything that their country stands for. all the while being ushered in an era of ugliness. Our cities are uglier than they've ever been. They're covered in trash. Our buildings are ugly. You drive around the Inland Empire, which is where I live, and there's, all of these, buildings that are just ugly.
Just squares. Where's the gargoyles? Where's
Yeah,
the
at one point,
What happened
we
in the
used to
70s and
build
80s,
beautiful
man? This
things. We used to
contemporary.
build incredible infrastructure when we were at a time where, most people believed in God. And it's clear to me, just driving around and looking around our cities, just looking at the human waste, just looking at the ugly buildings, that we're no longer a culture that believes.
Yeah. You know
bunch of
what?
plywood?
You this is about the fourth or fifth time you've reminded me of something that I wanted to ask you about. You had a clip that went up the other day, and I don't think you intended for the clip to bring this to anybody's attention. But you were at this Republican assembly over the weekend, and um, uh, you had come out and said, Bianco and Hilton, they're my boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
I back them both. But you started it with, first and foremost, I love Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody said nothing. There wasn't a peep in there. And I was like, I couldn't get past that. But I was like, well, what's going on in here, man? Like, do we not love our guy anymore? Like, that's my God.
Especially in the California Republican Assembly. You're not the first person to bring that up to me. I've gone to church every Sunday. It's changed my life. It was a big part of, who I am and what I do, watching my children getting baptized, every Sunday since February 22nd of 2024. What happened was I spoke with this gentleman. His name's Father Josiah of Patristic Nectar of St. Andrew's Orthodox Church. And he had asked me to meet with him when I was running for Congress. And he challenged me in a lot of ways. That was very interesting to me. He said, because I'm very anti-war. And he said, okay, so then you must be pro-life. And I said, well, no, I'm not really, pro-life. I believe in choice and whatnot. He goes, okay, well, then you're just saying whatever's comfortable and whatever's popular. And I said, no, I'm not. And, and he goes, well, do you go to church? And I said, are you a Christian? I said, yeah, I'm a Christian. Do you go to church? No, I believe, wherever two or more are gathered. He goes, listen, even David had the prophet Nathan that he confided in. You need to find a church. And I did. I've been going to church ever since, every Sunday. It has changed me. It's opened up my eyes to a lot of the evil, but it's also given me a better read on me, on my faith. It's given me a reason to be more principled and more convicted, because now when I can stand up and say, yeah, I'm pro-life. I'm pro-life across the board. I believe that, we don't need to be killing one another in war. It's $1 trillion industry. I believe that we don't need to be, killing all of these children. It's $1 trillion a year industry. $2 trillion a year just for death. That's something that we should really think about. What about 32 million people have died since the beginning of every war, since the Civil War? 32 million people. But about 67 million children have been aborted in just America since Roe v. Wade. And so that's about 1 million children every year at about the cost of $1,000 a piece, which means $1 trillion a year going into death, destruction, and decay, not just here, but throughout the world. And so, I am very anti-war. I want to divest away from these systems of death, decay, and destruction, and to invest into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The most dangerous place in the world should not be the womb of an American woman. We need to bring back a little bit more accountability. And if it's nothing more than, okay, listen, abortion's legal in California, then pay for it. You pay for it, $1,000, not other people in your healthcare, co-op, not other public taxpayers who pay 73 cents on every dollar for every medical bill in California. That's $1 trillion industry, and it has been brought about through carelessness in a culture that no longer worships God. And so it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart for these women that have gone through it, that were told that abortion's health care, because every year for the rest of their life they think about how old their children are or how old their children were going to be. It breaks my heart for these men, some of which didn't want to see their children be, eliminated. And it brings back an element of accountability. Listen, I'm a smoker. I have to pay a sin tax when I smoke. It should be the same kind of thing with abortion. It doesn't need to be government subsidized. It doesn't need to be paid for by we the people. And war, it's the same thing. We don't need to be overextending ourselves, killing people throughout the world while people are falling victim to fentanyl. They're falling victim to homelessness. They're falling victim to drug addiction, to prostitution, to student loan debt, to economic devastation. We have veterans killing themselves to the rate of about 20 plus a day. Tell me that we can't invest more in systems that support life and divest away from systems of death.
Man, you know what? I didn't know that it costs $1,000 a child to murder through the abortion process. I like the fact that you call it accountability. I said the same thing earlier today. I It's funny. I talked about all these things today. Um, I said the same thing. It's time that we hold the men and women that go out and decide to have sex together. We got to hold them accountable. If if you are in college and you had sex, well, you knew the consequences of having sex. The condom could break. The leakage happens. Uh, you know, if you get pregnant, you should have to raise that child or put it up for adoption. Whatever the options are, but abortion should not be the first choice or the state
So it's become a
funded
punch
choice.
card system. And the thing is when we talk about investing in life, I talk about life. Like, let's make it more possible for mothers to deliver and then to spend time with their families, to spend time with their children. We should be moving towards becoming more of a single income household, but we can't do that when we dilute the labor pool with illegal immigrants, with people that don't actually want to be in the workforce to begin with. By that I'm talking about, a lot of our women want to be at home taking care of their children. Some of them want to work, and I'm not going to take anything away from that. A lot of people want to work, but they should not be forced to. Over the years, what's happened is our birthright of being idle has been taken away from us. The ability to wake up and just do nothing with your time has been taken away from us. And what we've been pushed into is to more and more systems where your day is being monitored, where your dollar is being taken from you, extracted from you in more and more different ways. And what that does is it really takes away your time. And so people tell me that really want to have children, I can't afford to have kids. And I think that's the saddest sentence that should ever come across anyone's lips. We should be ashamed of ourselves here in California that people are choosing not to have kids because they can't afford it.
Can't afford to have kids. What the man? The state will pay to feed your kids. Go to the damn high school. They're giving away food. Gavin Newsom is carving them up. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So the thing is, let's take care of these kids. Let's make sure that we've got systems that are available, and then let's make sure that we're catching them when they fall through the cracks, right? So if we're going to invest in life, we need to invest in all of life, which means that we need to clean up the adoption systems. We need to clean up the foster care system, which is ripe with corruption and abuse and money laundering.
Right.
We need to clean up the systems where people fall through the cracks. We need to make sure that if somebody falls victim to drug abuse or addiction or to a mental health crisis, that we've got mental health facilities to help bring them back from the edge. We need to make sure that we've got drug rehabilitation centers that are ready to get people back on their feet. We need to make sure that we've got procedures in place and operations in place that can go in and combat human trafficking, because it's not just enough to start protecting life in the womb. We need to give a crap about it once it gets here. We need to give a crap about these babies and these families and these children. We're supposed to look after the widows and orphans. And so our foster care system is full of these people that are aging out of the system. 70% of the people that are, over 80% of the people that are on the streets come from the foster care system. A lot of the people that are being trafficked and sold into sex slavery come directly through the foster care system. And so we need to do a better job of taking care of California's children, the people that are already here, that already exist.
Yeah.
And we need to be better stewards of their future.
Yeah, we need as a society we need to hold ourselves up to a higher standard.
What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Gio.
As a society, we need to hold ourselves up to a higher standard. It's
Correct.
I don't understand why we have allowed ourselves to become a nation of, you know, it's not just the Black community, but the Hispanic community, and now other communities, including the white community, where you have all of these fatherless households. Why? Why is that a thing? Why have we allowed ourselves to become that sort of
We've learned
society?
to hate ourselves. And so there's this great speech by Malcolm X, and it's called The Ballot or the Bullet. And I like Malcolm X. He's a nationalist. He was very extreme. He wrote a book called As Told to Alex Haley. Malcolm X is one of my favorite books ever written. Very radical dude. But one of the things that he talked about in his Ballot or the Bullet speech said, who taught you to hate yourself? And what happened is we have been taught self-hatred. And what he was talking about specifically to the Black culture, he said, who taught you to dye your hair blonde? And who taught you to be ashamed of your skin?
Mhm.
You can really apply it to a lot of our different cultures. Who taught, there are white women dyeing their hair more blonde. You've got women of all different colors putting in blue eye contacts. And so we've been taught to be ashamed of who we are, the skin that we were born in, the color of our eyes, the color of our skin. And so we hate ourselves. And when we hate ourselves, we hate the culture that we come from. And when you hate the culture that you come from, you're willing to objectify the people around you. And when you're willing to objectify the people around you, you don't care about their well-being. And so you're willing to treat them like product, which means that you're willing to sell them bad drugs, or you're willing to sell them into sex slavery. And if we're willing to sell our own, it is a drastic form of self-hatred that we have been walked through, culturally conditioned into, because that is not normal for America. We used to have a great deal of pride in being American, being from America. Sure, we adopted systems of slavery just like the rest of the world, but we abolished it here. Sure, we had systems that were broken, but you know what? We made sure that we created a Bill of Rights. We created a constitution. We had a republic that protected the smallest minority of the individual. We created a Republican Party, which was an abolitionist, radical abolitionist party that stood against slavery. We have historically pledged to one another, like I said, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We've held one another accountable. We've sharpened one another throughout the years. We should be proud of what we have created. And if we're not proud of what we have created, we should be at least proud of what our grandparents have created, because they created the shining city on a hill where water came out of a tap, where we had a functioning railroad system and a highway system and a transcontinental system, and we built 60 nuclear power facilities in 10 years. We have so much to be proud of, but we've been taught to be ashamed.
Mhm.
And when you're ashamed, you'll objectify people. And that's not what I want to do anymore. I want us to be proud again, because we've all struggled. My mom went through cancer, had to move in with me, got a double mastectomy. It was financially devastating. My wife had to stop teaching. That's my struggle. That's everyone's struggle. I made $1 million in 2 years. I lost $1 million. That's everyone's struggle. I walk around, I've got 5 kids, 2 of which are graduating from high school this year, and they don't know what they're going to do. I'm worried about them and that they're ever going to be able to buy a house. That's everyone's struggle. 29% interest rate on a credit card. That's everyone. Buy now, pay later for groceries and fast food. Grocery bills that are skyrocketing, energy bills that are skyrocketing, insurance that you can't even get. It taking $120 to fill up my gas tank. We are struggling. We have been squeezed. We have been fleeced. We are overtaxed and overburdened. And all you have to do in this country to lose everything is get sick.
Mhm.
Richest country on earth. All you got to do is get sick. 650,000 medical bankruptcies a year. We should be ashamed of ourselves. 22 veterans a day killing themselves. We should be ashamed of ourselves. 100,000 overdoses due to fentanyl. We should be ashamed of ourselves. We need to stand up and regain the pride that is inherent to being an American.
I think what do they say? It's like I don't know the percentage, but they say a good percentage is one paycheck away from just bankruptcy or just
They
going
say
downhill.
40% of people can't expect an unexpected bill of $400 or more.
That's a
Really,
tire.
that's a car engine blowing out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's, one car accident. That's you're accidentally leaving the heater on, when you were
Yeah.
away for, the day. I mean, it's a few small things, and we all don't realize we're just one or two bad days away from being that guy on the streets holding that
Mhm.
sign. And if you're not one or two bad days away, good for you. I'm so glad that you've got a family, that you have infrastructure, that you've got infrastructure of support and love around you. But you know what? There are people sleeping in their car tonight,
Yep.
all over the place. In every shopping center in America, people sleeping in their car, sleeping in storage units, in between jobs. And these aren't bums. These aren't people that are sleeping in their car because they're lazy or because they're losers. It's because they can't afford rent anywhere on a minimum wage job in the state of California. There's not a
Right.
single zip code in the state of California where you can afford to rent a one-bedroom apartment on minimum wage. And so you've got people working 2 and 3 jobs. I freaking, I had a shop, and I would open up that shop every day, and I would go out in there about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'd open up my shop, and every day there'd be somebody getting ready for work that day, putting on their work clothes that slept the night before in their car.
Hmm.
That's real. Those are the people that we need to be standing up for. Those are the people that we should care about. And they've been marginalized by a society that doesn't give a crap about them, especially if they're men. When you look at the facilities and what's available to people when they're homeless, especially men, we have no sympathy for you here in America.
Man, David, I have to ask because I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight if I didn't ask you. Who's on the Serpa ticket?
Who's on the Serpa ticket?
Who's on the Serpa ticket? I'm fed. I don't really give a shit about the golden ticket. I want to know who's on the Serpa ticket.
Yeah, a lot of people who have been watching me for a long time, especially you guys call it out on X, you call it out on Instagram. You say this was Serpa's idea. We interviewed Serpa 10 months ago. Serpa called this first. Who's on the Serpa ticket? Okay, I'm going to tell you some people. I really like Herb Morgan for controller. At first, I thought, and I told him this, I said, at first I thought you were too old. I wasn't excited about you, but he's got so much experience, and he's really working right now on Cal Doge with Ginny Ray LaRue to expose the waste, fraud, and abuse. I told Steve I didn't want to join the golden ticket or any ticket for that matter unless we were going to be exposing the waste, fraud, and abuse, but also prosecuting those findings. And so Steve connected me with Mike Gates, and Michael Gates is an attorney out of Huntington Beach. He was the attorney general out there. That guy's amazing. He's all about prosecutions. But even if he wasn't, we've got Bill Asaley leading prosecutions, out of the attorney general's office in D.C. We've got Vice President J.D. Vance, who's been tasked with a task force to, expose fraud. In insurance, I like Stacey Korsgaard. She's a fellow basketball player, and I love basketball. But for the last 30 years, we haven't actually had an insurance representative or an insurance commissioner that has experience in insurance. It's one of the reasons why the insurance industry has left the state of California, and we're responsible for
I gotta
about
cut you off, David.
9%
I gotta
of
pause you there.
total economic
I gotta
economy.
gotta
The total economy is insurance.
I gotta pause you there.
For
I gotta pause you on the
Superintendent of
insurance.
Construction, Sonia Shaw, the mama bear, taking on the teachers unions. But what do you go ahead? What's up, Gio?
I gotta pause you on the insurance.
Yeah.
You don't need insurance experience. You just gotta have experience on gay trips.
You're talking about Ricardo Lara. Yeah, who spent his whole time on vacation. Yeah, no. So the thing is people, when they talk about government, and this is part of what we talked about 10 months ago, they don't know about the executive branch. They don't know what the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, the insurance commissioner, the superintendent of public instruction, the controller, the state treasurer, they don't know what any of those people do. And so Herb Morgan for controller, Michael Gates for attorney general, Sonia Shaw for public instruction, Stacy Korsgaarden for insurance. Now, lieutenant governor is an interesting one. I was telling, Steve for months and months and months that I'm not a big fan of Gloria Romero joining the Golden Ticket, being a member of the Democratic Party for as long as she was. But, she was standing up for, against the Democrats in her own party. She supported Larry Elder. She supported President Trump. She's done a good job on these interviews. But a couple of people have entered the lieutenant governor's race that I think are worth taking a look at. One of those people is David Kallenberg out of Northern California. He's a farmer. He's got about 170,000 followers on Facebook. He's picking up a lot of steam. The other one is Evie Lynch. She's an Air Force veteran that's running for lieutenant governor. And so the lieutenant governor, that one is kind of out. We'll see who it is. I'm leaning towards Kallenberg right now, just to be completely honest and forthright. We talk regularly. He's a very smart guy. And then for Secretary of State, Don Wagner. He's the only Republican that's running right now, but that's important if we're going to get control of our elections. And so I think I went through all 7 of those. The last one is the governor's race. I'm pretty torn right now between Hilton and Bianco. At one point or another, I probably will get behind one or the other of them. But for right now, I think it's extraordinarily important that we stop bashing the 2 of them, especially from the top of the ticket, them bashing each other, because even though DeMaio doesn't think so, I think we could see a top 2 Republican runoff in the jungle primary in the general election. So if the top 2 in California, regardless of political party, they go on to face one another in the general election, whether they're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, whatever. What's been happening for a lot of these polls is that Bianco and Hilton were showing up in the first and second spot, and the Democrats were splitting their ticket between them. And what was very interesting about that is the Democrats are very divided. And it's a great time for Republicans to capitalize on that, because they are so split, so divided, that they did not endorse at the California Democratic Conference 5 out of the 8 positions in the executive. They didn't endorse for governor. They didn't endorse for lieutenant governor. They didn't endorse for treasurer. So there's a revolution happening in the Democratic Party where they know that the Democrats are responsible for running them into the ground and the state of the ground for the last several years. And now they're trying to hold people accountable. So the Malia Cohens, the Fiona Maws, the Eleni Kounalakises, the Tony Thurmans, these Shirley Webbers, the people that have been around for the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, they're holding them accountable. They're primarying them. They're doing to the Democrats what we in the Republican Party need to be doing to the Republicans. We have to primary our old dogs. We have to take them out to pasture. You cannot teach an old dog new tricks. If you want to enforce term limits, enforce them by primarying people. But what happens is the Republican Party gatekeeps on all of the different local levels, so it never ends up happening. But yeah, so for the executive branch, those are my picks. That's kind of who I'm rolling with right now. Lots of good people, and in fact, I'm going to be on with Sierra, with Herb Morgan on her show next week, being interviewed together. So I'm collaborating with a lot of these guys. I really, I love Stacy Korsgaarden. I love, Herb Morgan. I love Michael Gates. I love Sonia Shaw. There's a lot. I love David Kallenberg. There's a lot of really good people running for office right now in the executive branch. It's going to be very interesting to watch the way that this thing shakes out.
Are you going to be at the GOP convention?
What was that?
Are you going to be at the GOP convention?
Oh, yes. I was on the phone all day today from 8 a.m. until 6 o'clock at night, making phone calls, inviting people to the CAGOP. There's a Republican revolution happening in the Republican Party, period. There's a revolution. We're going further right. I know that the moderates, blah, 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 we're going further right. We're going to be more Republican, more nationalist. We're going to prioritize our people over anyone else. We're going to prioritize Californians. And these old boomers that have been gatekeeping the Republican Party, keeping out the young talent, your day is done. Your day is done. Your days are numbered. The clock is ticking. You are on the clock. And so I'm not going to get bullied by Carl DeMaio. I had faith in that punk. I believed in him because people were like, listen, man, Carl's doing good things. So I put on my earplugs. I watched his show. I read the subtitles. And, I appreciate what he's doing. I appreciate the work that he's doing. But what he's doing is he's putting himself in a position to gatekeep. So, yeah, I'm going to be there at the CAGOP from April 10th to April 12th. I will be there all 3 days. And I'm going to be calling a bunch of people to invite them because we need young people. And by young, I mean everyone 45 and under. Because in the Republican Party, you're still considered young at 40. You're like the youngest person in the room at 40 years old. But your movement is only as strong and as alive as your youngest person, which is why we need the people, that are 18, 19, 20 years old, that are in their 20s and 30s, Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X. We've got to team up against these old dogs that are ruining the Republican Party and have destroyed our party and have made it so that we don't even have an opposition party in the state of California.
You heard him here first. Renegaders! Mount up.
Hey, I'm gonna be there, David. I wanna be there with you. I want to make sure that they know we're here to fight, and we're not gonna be here with all the old bullshit.
That's right, brother.
I want to say to all of our listeners, please go and check out David Serpa's website, Serpa for California, or excuse me, let me spell it out. SERPAFORCA.com, serpaforcalifornia.com. Go there, learn all about him. Follow him on Instagram, follow him on X, follow him everywhere because Serpa is not a boring guy. He will lighten up your day every day. David, would you mind closing us out in a prayer?
Sure. No, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for gathering us here today in your name to gather to brainstorm with both Gio and Christian. I want to thank you for taking care of our families, for keeping us strong in the faith. I want to thank you for all of the gifts that you've been given, that you've given Gio. I want to thank you for the gifts that you've given Christian. I want to thank you for them using those gifts to serve their audience and to serve you, Lord. And I want to pray that you continue to send the Holy Spirit out in front of us, that you send the Holy Spirit into the CAGOP, into the conference, into these races throughout the state of California, into these cities to comfort these people that are struggling, that are hungry, that are being sex trafficked, that are being human trafficked, that are sleeping in their cars, that don't know how they're going to make their rent, that don't know how they're going to make their groceries. Lord, I pray that you wrap them up in your comfort. I pray that you give them rest. I pray that you give them your peace, Lord, and that you also animate them to fight, to lock shields. And I pray that you put your message on their hearts, not to be a unifier, Lord, but I pray that you help us to be stronger and more convicted so that we can divide properly, so that we can separate the chaff from the wheat, so that we can till the soil and remove the rocks and remove the weeds and allow good seeds to be planted and to take root and to grow and to be harvested and for good works to be done in your name, Lord. We pray that you continue to put your Holy Spirit into our races, that you go out in front of us, that you that are in the words that we speak, that are in the bills that we write, that are in the movements that we make. We pray that you bring the right people together at the right time so that we can deliver our state into your hands, Lord, so that we can build this kingdom of heaven, so that we can build a kingdom that is in your image. We know that we are up against great odds here in the state of California. We know that the cards are stacked up against us. We know that we are surrounded on all sides. But we also know that you're a God that loves underdogs. We know that you're a God that loves to be worshiped and glorified in the fight, and that you love to be worshiped and glorified when your followers have been counted out, that you've sent away people when you feel like they're too much to fight the fight. And so we are not few, Lord. We are exactly the people that we need to be, and we are grateful that you've brought us together today to have this conversation between Gio and Christian and I. We pray that there are many more conversations in the future. We pray that we have a very successful CAGOP for the April 10th, 11th, and 12th, in a very successful election cycle. And Lord, whether we win these elections or not, we pray that your will above all is done. Even if we don't understand it, we know that it's your will that's being done. It's just our job to steer, to move the boat forward, and we put the steering wheel in your hand. We put the map in your hand, and we have total and complete faith in you, Lord, that you're going to get us to where we're going. And in your name we pray. Amen.
In Jesus' name. Amen. David, closing statement? Closing statement?
Closing statement. I am everything that they said that I am. Everything that they've whispered about me is probably true. I'm just as crazy as they say I am. I'm just as big of a lunatic, because the thing is it is no sign of mental well-being to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And our society is sick. You were not sent here to adjust to this sick society. You were sent here to change it. And if anything that I have said has resonated with you here tonight, if you found yourself a part of this fight, reach out to Dan, or reach out to Gio, reach out to Christian, reach out to me through the website, through my phone number that's online. We want you to be here. This is the body. We are here to place our hands to the plow. So I'm grateful for the platform. If you have some coin and you could donate, that would be wonderful. I am not a wealthy man. Like I've said, I'm bankrupt. I've got an empty pool out front. I've surrendered my car. Could not be more broke. I put it all on the table here with this. I jumped in. With my fortune, my sacred honor, my life, with both feet into this race. And so I need help getting there, brothers. I need help getting there, family. So if you can help me get there, if you can help me stay active in the fight, money's not the most important thing. I'm not a money worshiper, but it's right up there with oxygen when it comes to politics. It's going to enable me to fight the good fight. So thank you for watching this. Get tuned into those other executive branch members. Look into these other good people, and make sure that you continue to tune into Latino Free Minds, because you guys are the only ones that I saw out there making sure that you interviewed all of the candidates before you sent out an endorsement. So I'm proud to know you guys. I'm proud to be associated with you guys. I'm grateful for the camaraderie that we have in trying to save our state.
Thank you so much, David. I appreciate you coming on. Again, please follow David. You will not be bored. And let's make it happen. Let's make it happen, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless.
God bless.